Hey, this is Carlos. Welcome back. And I want to talk to you today about getting your ex back. How do you do it? And I'm going to talk more specifically about the big mistakes that many women make when they're trying to do this, because it's really more the things you do wrong that wreck it for you than having some specific surefire magic bullet. So if you can avoid the mistakes, which is actually pretty easy to do, most of the time you can accomplish your goal. So the first thing to remember is that it's an addiction. All of the love that you give, all the love you feel at the start of a relationship translates into a literal chemical addiction in the body. Now, what this does is when you first meet a guy and you find that there's some attraction there, all the way up to and through the first time you sleep with him, you're basically conditioning your brain and sending hormones into your brain without even realizing it. This is one of the things that many of the people don't realize about the emotion of love, is that there's an actual physical component to it. It's not just thinking, okay? It's not just something that's mystical and comes out of thin air or something that's part of your soul. It's actually a physical thing. There are parts of your brain that respond to these signals too, and there's also a purpose behind them. The chemicals that are released in your brain are chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. These are some of the love drugs that condition your brain to desire the company of somebody. And these drugs are just as potent and powerful as the drugs you would buy, let's say, from a dealer on the street, you know, in hardcore terms. The guy that sells you cocaine or crack or any of those really addictive substances is really selling you something that goes to work in your brain the same way that these chemicals do. And as a matter of fact, a lot of those drugs, the illegal drugs, will actually work on your brain in the exact same way. It affects your dopamine receptors and things like that to give you a certain pleasurable feeling, that rush, that high. Well, you get this also when you're in love, and your brain actually becomes addicted to that person because to get that same chemical release, you need to be near the person. And when that person's not near you, your brain actually it goes through withdrawal. Okay, and that's the thing to understand, is that when you are first breaking up or in the process of possibly losing a connection with a man, that very often what's going on is you're simply losing that chemical and going through a chemical addiction withdrawal, which is if you've ever seen any movie with this sort of thing depicted in it from Hollywood or otherwise, you kind of get an inkling of what it's like, right? It's painful. It's not something you want. You'll do anything to alleviate the pain that you're feeling. And you go through a kind of panic when you can't get that love and feeling, for lack of a better word. So I'm going to talk about these panic mistakes that you make and why you panic. I've already actually told you why you panic, but I'm going to tell you what these panic mistakes typically are so you can avoid them. The first panic mistake is calling and texting too much. Okay, calling and texting all the time. What happens is I get a lot of emails that say, Carlos, you know what, we just broke up a few days ago, and since then I'm sending messages every day and constantly, but he never replies to me. I have to text him 100 times just so he replies to me once, and I really love him, and I want to be with him. I want him back, but I don't understand. Why is he treating me like this? He said he loved me, and now this. Kind of crazy, right? And I get that same. This is about 90 to 95% of the women that write into me who are desperate to get their ex back. It's a huge mistake, first of all, to be in contact with them all the time. First of all, it's actually a big mistake to stay in contact at all in the first week or so. You have to respect that person, especially if they broke up with you. I'm assuming this is a situation where you didn't break up with them, they're breaking up with you, or they're cutting off the connection. He's cutting off the connection from you, okay? Now, if he cuts off that connection or breaks up with you, it's obviously a situation that you're going to be wanting to fix. If it was the other way around, well, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because you wouldn't want your ex back. You were trying to break up with him in the first place. But your instincts are going to tell you, this panic situation actually is going to tell you that if you stay in contact with your ex somehow, they're not going to forget about you. You're always going to be in their mind, and hopefully they're going to go, you know what, you're right. You're always around. Why not? I'll take you back. It's kind of a crazy message when you say it like that, but that's what the panic is making you think. It doesn't really work that way. You know that. In fact, every time you call or text them, you're really showing them that you're kind of a needy person, and then that you're miserable without them. And that neediness, that insecurity, it's unattractive, and it will actually push him further away. Okay? Now, you might say, well, if I can't call him or text him or can stay in contact, how can I win him back? You should eventually reconnect with them, but you have to do it in a very specific way. Okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The next mistake that most women make is the begging, the sympathy, and the pity, sometimes even the guilt. If begging actually worked after a breakup, nobody would ever break up, right? Because it's the easiest way to win somebody back. All you got to do is beg and they come back. Please, 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 come back. I promise, please, please, please. Obviously, the begging isn't what they don't need you to pull on them more. Again, it makes you look very weak and insecure to do that. So don't use that because it obviously doesn't work, and it's really an act of desperation, and it looks rather pitiful to them. Again, it's going to push them further away. A lot of people also think, basically, when they're going through this, is if the other person knows just how horribly miserable I am, if he knows how horrible this is for me, he'll come back. Or if he knows that I can't continue my life without him, well, then he'll take me back. Again, the panic, it's messing with your head. Trust me, nobody likes to take their ex back out of pity. No one's going to be attracted to somebody who's miserable all the time. And even if your ex does come back because of this, do you really want them to be with you because of pity or sympathy or feeling like you're pathetic? No, you don't. Panic mistake number 3 is lowering boundaries. Okay, lowering boundaries. Basically, what you're doing is you're letting the other person walk all over you. Your instincts are trying to tell you that, well, if you just go along with everything, if you do everything they want, they'll come back. If you make it easy for them, if you make it a loving, what you think is a loving situation, which is to let them walk all over you, be a doormat for them, your instinct or your panic is trying to tell you that your needs and your values and your desires, everything about you just really doesn't matter, and that's all you need to do to bring the other person back. But what will happen underneath that is, underneath your sacrifice, is you're going to let them walk all over you. You do become this doormat, this person that they can totally trash, and you'll do anything for it. And the other person, not because they're bad, but because it's just human nature, they'll just take advantage of you, and they can't help it, okay? Again, basically lowering your boundaries, all your personal boundaries to get the other person back is only going to breed resentment in the other person because you're playing them a little bit. It's a game, and they understand that. But something about human nature is we can't sometimes resist, and we'll get drawn into that unhealthy dynamic. So don't fall for that one. Mistake number 4 is freaking out or panicking if they were to start dating. Now, this happens a lot. The thought of your ex being with another person doubles the pain of a breakup. In fact, it makes it go through the roof. It skyrockets. Why? Because it's the worst thing imaginable. It's the worst thing you can think of, is the person that you love and want back is somebody else's. Now you've got jealousy. Now you've got insecurity. Now you've got inadequacy issues. A ton of things are going to come up. It's gut-wrenching, really. Let's face it. It's horrible. But again, it's not that bad if you know what's really going on. Underneath the panic, ignore the panic right now. You're going to go into this panic because you're going to think you're going to lose this person to the other person. You're going to lose this guy to another woman. And what's really happening here is that typically your man is in a rebound relationship. Now, rebound relationships are always short-lived. It's simply something to make him feel better, or it's something to help him get over you in many cases, which really doesn't work, by the way. And it always ends. Those relationships always seem to end. Now, fortunately for you, because of this, if you know how to handle the situation correctly, you'll win and you can get him back. But you can't if you panic and you go crazy about this guy dating somebody else. It's just not going to work for you. All right? Keep that in mind. The most important thing you can do while they're in a rebound situation like this is to be cool about it. Now, it's also going to be the toughest thing for you to do. It's probably the most difficult thing I think a human being can do, is to be cool while their ex is possibly seeing somebody else. It will just drive you crazy. Whatever you do, you can't go telling them, oh, you need to break up with this other person, or try and sabotage the relationship, or do something really freaky and kind of crazy. You got to be careful. Remember, this other person has a huge hole in their life without you. They do obviously have feelings for you, and they're trying to put a Band-Aid on it by dating another person. And they don't realize it, but they're actually making it more likely that they'll want to come back with you. But again, only if you avoid panicking in that situation. Deadly mistake number 5 is flooding them with love. Okay, you're just going to constantly shower them with affection, and your panic is going to tell you that, again, if your ex just knows how much you really love them, how much you care about them, well, then they're going to come back to you for that, right? If you can make them believe that there's nobody else in the world better than you, then they must fall in love with you. Now, this is one of those irrational things that when you're not in a relationship or you're not in a breakup situation, you're going to realize is whoa, that's kind of crazy. You can't make somebody love you simply by loving them. This is one of the big mistakes that Hollywood has perpetuated over the years, and it's horrible. It's one of those things that says, oh, if I just love somebody hard enough and strong enough, that love is enough to make them want me. And it's not true. We don't fall in love with a person because of that. What we fall in love with a person for is there's a lot of factors. One of them is vulnerability. Another is being there at certain times for us when we need them. But another critical element that's almost always overlooked, especially in Hollywood, is the necessity of chemistry, that initial spark of attraction. Now, sometimes it does come later. Don't get me wrong. I've known people, my best friend from high school even, who married a woman that he knew as friends for years. And finally, one night, they just finally had that spark. But to get to that point where that happens can take a lot of work, and sometimes it may never happen at all. So you can't bet on that. Again, the panic situation is going to tell you that if you can just show them enough love and affection, kind of connected to the one where I told you about the if you can lower your boundaries enough, if you can just show them enough love, that's not going to help you, unfortunately. In fact, the more you smother them, the more they're going to want to run, the more they're going to feel trapped, the more they're going to say, whoa, I got to get out of here, I'm freaking out, and they're going to freak out and they're going to push further away, which does what to you? Makes you more panicked, and the cycle continues. So these are the 5 big mistakes. These are the most important mistakes that most women make when they're trying to get their ex back, is they make these mistakes up front and they eliminate the possibility of him coming back because they've basically sabotaged it too far. It's like, I'm trying to think of a good example here. It's like a recipe. You're trying to follow a recipe to build a cake or to make a cake, but you're not using the right ingredients and you make some serious mistakes up front. Maybe you put too much flour in the mix, or not enough flour, or you don't put in the egg, or you miss something in the recipe. It doesn't matter what you do after the fact. You can't fix this mistake. Once you put it in the oven, it's not going to bake correctly. And the same thing will happen. You're not going to be able to get your ex back correctly if you make these mistakes up front. I hope the analogy plays out for you there. So how can you do this? How can you actually do it? Well, I do have a program that has a very solid plan, a very complete plan for the rest of the steps. After you've avoided the mistakes, there are distinct steps you can take to win them back. And they also resolve all these other issues and make it very easy for you to get back into the relationship. So you can learn more about this. You can learn more about how to take the correct steps to win over the man again, to get him back, by going to datingadviceguru.com. Just go to datingadviceguru.com. Over in the sidebar there, you'll see a love detector test, so you can find out right away, hey, is there love there to save? Put your name in there. I'll send you that free love quiz, and then I'll also send you some of my best tips I've got and links to some stuff where you can learn all these strategies. Just get over there and do it. Go over to datingadviceguru.com so that I can help you win the man of your dreams and have the kind of romantic life you deserve. This is Carlos Cavallo from datingadviceguru.com. I'll be talking again soon.